أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم رسولا ونبيا ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Continuing on with the Prophet ﷺ's legendary government military legacy, the era of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. After completing a total of 50 videos, the era of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, the era of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq being the legendary military legacy of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and a total of 30 videos of the legendary military career of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam himself. Now on the volume 2 of the biography of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab, page number 157, 2.1.6, seeking the help of former apostates who had repented. During the Ridda wars and the conquest, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq did not seek the help of any former apostate, but Umar mobilized them after they repented and set their affairs straight, and acquired some Islamic education, but he did not appoint any of them to a position of authority. According to one report, he said to Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas concerning Tulayha ibn Khuwaylid al-Asadi and Amr ibn Ma'adi Yaqrib al-Zubaydi, seek their help, but do not appoint them over 100 men. What we learned from this particular instruction by Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab actions, the two Caliphs Abu Bakr and Umar, in fact, is that if a person apostatizes from Islam, then repents and come back, his repentance is accepted and his blood and wealth are protected. He has the same rights and duties as all other Muslims, except that he is not to be appointed to any position of authority over the Muslims' affairs, especially in matters of leadership. That is because it is possible that his repentance may be hypocritical, and if that is the case and he is appointed to a position of authority and leadership, he will cause great mischief in the land and upset the balance of life. He will bring in others who are like him and of the hypocrites and push away the sincere believers, and the Islamic society will become a society that is dominated by the characteristics of Jahiliyyah, which means eras of darkness. This wise policy of these two righteously guided caliphs was aimed at protecting the Muslim society from evildoers sneaking in to positions of leadership. Perhaps the reason for this policy was also a means of making the punishment go against what they, the former apostates, had tried to achieve, and of deterring anyone who might be tempted to rebel against the Islamic principles and seek a position of leadership by means of opposing Islam and befriending the enemies of the faith. 2.1.7, a letter from the Khalif to Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas received a letter from Umar bin Khattab whilst he was campaigning in Shiraf on the border of Iraq, ordering him to march towards Persia. In this letter it said, "March from Shiraf towards Persia with the Muslims who are with you. Put your trust in Allah and seek help from him in all of your affairs. Remember that you are going towards a nation whose numbers are great and whose weapons are superior. They are tough people in a forbidding land, which, although it is a plain will be difficult to conquer, because there are many lakes, running water, and vast valleys, unless you meet some small groups of them. If you encounter the people or some of them, then strike them first. Beware of giving them time to wait for reinforcements after the first confrontation. Do not be deceived, because they are cheaters and deceivers. You have to take them very seriously and deal with them in a decisive manner. When you reach Al-Qadisiyyah, set a post at the edge of Qaadisiyyah and let the people, example the Muslims, be between the wilderness and the inhabited land, or the inhabited land on the plain between the two. Then stay where you are and do not leave, for if they realize that you are there, they will strike you with all their might with their cavalry and infantry. If you show patience in facing your enemy and seek reward with Allah when fighting for him, intending to do your duty for Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, then I have great hope that you will prevail over them. After that, they will never again be able to assemble such a huge army, and if they do, they will be in such a state of fear that they will lose courage. If the outcome is otherwise, then you will have the wilderness behind you, and you can depart from the closest inhabited part of their land and to be closest inhabited part of your land, where you will feel more confident and have more knowledge of the land, and they will be more fearful. This advice concerning the choice of land where the army was to set a similar to advance this advice concerning the choice of land where the army was to settle is similar to the advice given by Musanna to Sa'd. Umar and Musanna were agreed on the choice of land. Al-Musanna's advice was the result of more than 3 years' experience of war against the Persians. This is indicative of Umar's brilliance in military planning. Even though he had never set foot in Al-Iraq, this advice also urged the army to keep away from the enemy's reach while sending raiding parties to harass them and incited their followers against them until the Muslims could bring them to a place of their own choosing for the major battle. Spiritual means of victory according to Umar. Umar wrote to Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhuma, reminding him of the spiritual means of victory, which were the most important. In his letter he said, pay a great deal of attention to your heart, your spiritual well-being. Talk to your troops, exhort them, and remind them of the importance of good intentions and of checking on themselves. Patience, for the help of Allah comes in accordance with good intentions, and the reward comes in accordance with how much one checks oneself. Be careful as you are on this mission for His sake, as ask Allah Jalla Jalaluhu to keep you safe and sound, and frequently repeat the words La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyul azim, which means there is no power and no strength except with Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. Write and tell me where you have reached with your army, for my lack of knowledge of your situation and that of your enemy is keeping me from writing some of the things I wanted to write. Describe to us the routes of the Muslims and the land that lies between you and Al-Madain, so that it is as if I can see it, and give me a clear picture of your situation. Fear Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and put your hope in Him and Him alone, and do not take anything for granted. Remember that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has made a promise to you. Put your trust in Allah Jalla Jalaluhu with regard to this mission you are embarking on, and beware lest you be removed from this position and replaced with someone else. In this letter, Sayyidina Umar bin Al-Khattab radiallahu anhu advised Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas to pay attention to the heart, the spiritual well-being, for the heart is the engine of the body. If it is sound, the entire body will be sound. Then he advised him to exhort his troops and remind them to be sincere towards Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and to seek reward with Him. He explained that the help of Allah is connected to that, and he warned him against being negligent towards the responsibility that he had undertaken and the conquest that lay ahead. He reminded them of the importance of being connected to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and that their strength was connected to His. He advised the Muslim commanders to tread a path between fear of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and hope, to tread a path, meaning to grow a path between Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, the fear of Allah, and hope, as we said, taqwa, for that which is with Him. This is the important attitude which reflects a deep understanding of Tawheed. He told him not to take anything for granted because of some righteous deeds that he did or because some people praised him and he reminded him that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu had promised victory to the Muslims and the destruction to the kuffar. He warned him against being negligent concerning any means of victory. For victory may not be granted to him, rather it may be granted to others whom Allah chose. 2.1.9 Saad's description of the location of Al-Qadisiyyah to Sayyidina Umar bin Al-Khattab and Sayyidina Umar bin Al-Khattab's response. Saad wrote to Umar bin Al-Khattab describing to him the land where he expected the decisive battle to take place. He said, and I quote, "All of those who have entered into peace treaties with the Muslims in the land between the two rivers are supporting the Persians. They have submitted to them and are preparing to fight us as well. The one whom they have chosen to fight us is Rustam. Among others like him, they are trying to annoy us and make us engage in skirmishes, and we are trying to annoy them and provoke them. The decree of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu will inevitably come to pass, and His will is to be submitted to, whether it is in our favor or not. We ask Allah to keep us safe and sound." Moving along now to page number 162. Umar wrote to Saad saying, "I have received and understood your letter. Stay where you are until Allah Jalla Jalaluhu brings your enemy to you. And remember that this confrontation is going to be decisive. If Allah Jalla Jalaluhu enables you to defeat them, do not stop there. Carry on until you conquer Al-Madain, for it will be destroyed, insha'Allahu. Jalla Jalaluhu has already promised that." From Umar's letter, it is clear that he had taken the right decision, which was that Saad should stay put and not leave his position. He should not hasten to fight the enemy, rather he should leave it to the enemy to initiate the fighting. He should invest his victory by pursuing the enemy to Al-Madain and conquering it. At the same time, he should take the material means necessary to achieving the victory. Umar did not ignore the spiritual aspects of the matter. He launched a psychological war against the enemy in their own land, the seat of their rule and power. He sent word to Saad saying, "I have a strong feeling that when you meet the enemy, you will defeat them. Then, if any one of you makes a gesture or speaks a word of safety to one of the Persians, then this man should be granted security, because even if it is done by mistake, fulfilling the promise is a means of achieving victory, and breaking a promise, even if it is done by mistake, it is a means that leads to defeat, which will weaken you and strengthen your enemy." It is as if Umar was living with the Muslim army, or he was among the Muslim soldiers at that time with all of his senses, because he was worried that he could not enjoy life or relax until he had heard news of them. In such cases, inspiration from Allah Jalla Jalaluhu was a means of reducing the great burden that Umar had undertaken, and a means of making the Muslims steadfast and strengthening their hearts. We see that Umar radiallahu anhu reminded the Muslims of some of the spiritual means by urging them to adhere to the word of honor, to be truthful in speech, and to fulfill promises, even if that was granted by an individual Muslim, or if there had been a misunderstanding and the Muslim did not intend to grant victory, security, but the enemy understood it as such. So, moving along now to 2.2. Umar asked Saad to send a delegation to debate the Persian king. Umar said to Saad in his letter, "Do not feel distressed by what you hear about them and what they come up with. Seek the help of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and put your trust in Him. Send to him some of men of wisdom and courage to call them to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu." Umar asked Saad to write to him every day. Saad started to gather some men of wisdom and encourage those whom he chose were men of understanding, and he chose them to be men of understanding and wisdom. Number 1, Nu'man ibn Muqram al-Muzani. Number 2, Bishr ibn Abi Rahm al-Juhani. Number 3, Hamla ibn Juwayh al-Kinani. Number 4, Handhala ibn Arabai At-Tamimi. Number 5, Furat ibn Hayyan al-Ajali. Number 6, Adi ibn Suhail. Number 7, Al-Mughira ibn Zarara ibn An-Nabash ibn Habib. Umar chose a group who were dignified and good-looking and who had deep insight. He also said, At-Tarid ibn Hajib At-Tamimi, Al-Ath ibn Qais Al-Kindi, Al-Harith ibn Hassan Al-Duhali, Asim ibn Amr At-Tamimi, Amr ibn Ma'di Karib Al-Zubaydi, Al-Mughira ibn Shuba Al-Thaqafi, and Mu'anna ibn Haritha Al-Shaybani. These were 14 da'iyas, 14 missionaries who Sa'd sent to call the king of Persia to al-Islam, acting on the orders of Sayyidina Umar bin Al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. They were leaders of their people as Umar wanted to have, who would be able to call Yazdajir with wisdom and beautiful preaching in a way that is best, in the hope that Allah might guide him and his troops to al-Islam and thus avoid bloodshed on both sides. This carefully selected delegation was of high caliber and able for the task for which they had been appointed, all of them, in addition to the qualities they enjoyed of good looks, dignity, and wisdom. They had previous knowledge of the Persians. Some of them had fought them, defeated them, and engaged in battles with them in previous campaigns. Some of them had long gone in delegations to Persian kings during the Jahiliyyah, and some of them know the Persian language. It is as if Sa'd chose them for this delegation after they had passed a kind of test to prove that they were qualified for the mission, as well as a kind of physical exam to determine their strength and weaknesses and their level of fitness and good looks. The blessed delegation led by Nu'man ibn Muqram reached al-Madain and entered to meet the Persian king Yazdagird, who asked them through his translator, "What brought you here? What motivated you to invade us and penetrate so deep into our land?" "It is because we were distracted from you that you were encouraged to attack us." And Nu'man ibn Muqrim spoke on their behalf and said, "Allah Jalla Jalaluhu had mercy on us and sent to us a messenger who commanded us to do good and forbid us from doing evil, and promised us if we responded, the good of this world and the hereafter of it will come to our feet. There was no tribe, but some of them responded, and others did not. Then he commanded us to start with those of the Arabs who opposed him. So we started with them, and they either joined him unwillingly, then became happy that they had joined him, or they joined him willingly and were blessed. We all recognize the superiority of what he brought over what we had been living with of enmity and hardship. Then he commanded us to start with the nations that were closest to us, and we called them to justice. We are calling you to our religion, which is a religion that recognizes what is good and confirms it as such, and recognizes what is evil and confirms it as such. If you refuse, then you may choose one of the bad options rather than the worst option, jizya. But if you refuse, then fighting. If you respond to our religion, we will leave with you the book of Allah on condition that you rule by its ruling, and we will leave you and let you run your affairs in your land. If you pay the jizya, we will accept it from you and leave you to run your own affairs. If you pay the jizya, we will accept it from you and will protect you, otherwise we will fight you." The Persian king Yazdagir said, "I do not know of any nation on earth that was more miserable and fewer in number and more divided than you. We used to delegate some of the tribes on the border to take care of you. You never hope to stand up to Persia. If you think you can defeat us, that is folly art. If you are going to If you are going through hardships, we will give you some food until things get easier, and we will honor your leaders and clothe you, and we will appoint a king to be kind to you. Al-Mughira ibn Zarara stood up and said, as for what you have said about our bad situation, that is true, and it was even worse than that. And he mentioned the miserable life of the Arabs and how Allah had showed mercy to them by sending the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As Nu'man had said, then he said, choose either pay the jizya with willing submission and feel yourselves subdued, or fight, or else save yourselves by becoming Muslims. Yazdagir said, were it not that envoys are not to be killed, I would have killed you. I have nothing for you. Then he ordered that a load of dust be brought, and he told his people, put this on their nobles and drive them out of Madain. Asim bin Amr stood up and said, I am the noblest of them. And he took the dust and went out to his mount and rode off. When he reached Sa'ad, he said to him, be of good cheer by Allah. Allah has given us the keys to the kingdom. Thus Rustam came out with his huge army, 100,000 strong or more, from Sabat. When he passed by Kutha, a town between Al-Madain and Ba'abil, he met an Arab man. Rustam asked him, what brought you here? What do you want from us? He said, we have come seeking the promise of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu that we will take possession of your land and sons if you refuse to submit. Rustam said, then we are placed under your control. The Arabs said, your deeds let you down, so Allah put you under our control. Do not be deceived by what you see around you. For you are not confronting people, rather you are confronting the divine decree. Rustam got angry with him and killed him. When his army passed Al-Baraz, a town between Al-Kufa and Al-Hilal, they seized its people and its wealth and drank wine and raped the women. The people of Al-Baraz complained to Rustam, and he said to his people, by Allah, that Arab spoke the truth. By Allah, nothing let us down but our own deeds. By Allah, even though they are in a state of war, the Arabs treated these people better than you are treating them today. When Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, the commander of the Muslim army, got news of Rustam, he sent to Amr ibn Ma'adi, Yaqrib al-Zubaydi, and Tulayha ibn Khuwaylid, along with 10 other men to find out about the army. They had not gone very far when they saw the enemy camp spread out along the banks of the river. They all went back apart from Tulayha, who continued until he had penetrated deeply among the enemy and gathered more information. Then he went back to Sa'd and told him what he found out. This Tulayha had been the one of the leaders of the apostates, but Umar allowed the Arabs who had apostatized and then repented to rejoin the jihad fi sabilillah, whereas Abu Bakr had not allowed them. But Umar did not allow those former leaders of the apostasy who went out for jihad after having repented to be appointed to the position of leadership. He was keen for them to be disciplined and to learn the meaning of faith and piety, and he gave them valuable opportunities to express the sincerity of their faith and piety. Tulayha and Al-Amr al-Zubaydi played an important role in the wars in Iraq and Persia. Inshallah, we will stop here and pick it up from page number 167. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. وتبارك اسم ربك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون. السلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.